Sorry, the number you have reached is not in service. Please check the number or try your call again. This is a recording.
Hey everyone, what the heck's going on? We knew that the new iPads were coming out today. Mark Gurman posted that, and he said back on Sunday it would just be a couple of days. Then he said they'll be out today, Tuesday. The new iPad Pro is the biggest one that came out. And then people are saying, well, what about Final Cut Pro on the iPad? Apple says, we've got a new video editor on the iPad for you. We've had LumaFusion for years. LumaFusion is a fantastic video editor. But we've got a new video editor coming on the iPad Pro. Yeah, we do. DaVinci Resolve. What? Now, of course, we know DaVinci Resolve puts out updates all the time, everything as much as they can. How are you, Richard? I'm doing fine, It's, what is it? 52 degrees here on the East Coast of the good old USA, Fahrenheit. Very, very nice. Everybody's, we're getting ready for the fall weather. I've got some things to talk about with this new version of DaVinci Resolve on the iPad Pro. We don't know much about it yet. It's coming out in 2022. Is it going to work on the M1 iPads? It's only going to work on the iPad Pros. How much of DaVinci is going to come to the iPad version? And of course, the biggest question is, Apple, are you awake? Are you awake up there in Cupertino? Looks Resolve's new iPad app is limited to color correction and cutting. Yes, it does. It's exactly correct. So far, with the pictures that we've seen, I mean, would you expect Fusion on the iPad? No, I don't think so. And the sound, what is that mixing board thing that they have, the audio program? So it's enough just to get the cut page. Color correction's a big deal. It'll be interesting, won't it? But that's only part of the story. The other part of the story is, Apple, are you awake up there in Cupertino? What the heck is going on? Does the iPad people, do they even talk to the Final Cut Pro team, or what's going on? Now I have a sneaking suspicion of what's going on. Tyler says Fairlight, that's what it is. Very cool. DaVinci Resolve is very, very cool application, so don't get me wrong. Kudos to DaVinci and Resolve. But, well, listen. Here's what, okay, here we go. Let me see, video graphics. Here's what it looks like. This is DaVinci Resolve on the iPad. It's not out yet. It's coming. Let me put this up there. It's coming in 2022 from what the video said. But if you notice down here at the bottom of the screen, there's only 2 pages. The cut page, I think, and then the color correction page. Now, I think that's the cut page, right? That's not even the edit page. Yeah, it's just a cut page. So that's a very basic version of Resolve. It's nothing like the full version. This is exactly what I've been saying. If they bring Final Cut Pro, well, At this point, it looks like Final Cut Pro is coming to the iPad now that DaVinci Resolve, the first big app, has made a step there. But as I've been saying all along, it's not going to be Final Cut Pro. It'll be Final Cut Lite on the iPad. Final Cut for the iPad. It can't be the full version of Final Cut on the iPad. There's too many, doesn't have the horsepower, etc. But Final Cut, even if they don't call it Lite, Final Cut for the iPad will be a light version of Final Cut, not the full version. Exactly what's happening with the Resolve, DaVinci Resolve. It's a light version. So far, we don't know the details yet because there's no details available other than the graphic that we just put up. This graphic, it only has 2 pages instead of the 4 or 5 pages as DaVinci normally has. The cut page, I think that's the cut page, and the color page. That's all it has. Cut page is a very scaled down version of the edit page. It's meant for fast, quick edits and stuff. So this is like DaVinci Resolve Lite. But it's interesting they beat Final Cut to the iPad, if indeed Final Cut's coming to the iPad. I think it is, but I don't know if it's coming in 2022, 2023, 2024. Well, I don't think it'll be 2024. The fact that DaVinci made it over now, DaVinci, the light version of the DaVinci is made to the iPad now, I don't think that Final Cut's going to be too far behind. I think there's going to be a version. Tyler says, I think they're awake. I think they're after Microsoft Surface Studio with the intent to make a larger iPad, and I wonder if that's why there was a wait to announce Final Cut Pro or Logic. Well, yeah, I don't know what they're doing. I mean, if you edit on Final Cut, if you use Final Cut now, you're editing on a Mac. Would you stop using the Mac and edit only on the iPad? I mean, there's some cool things about the iPad. The pencil is very, very cool. Absolutely like that a lot. But I don't understand. Apple does this all the time. They do these, it's like Apple iPad division, Mac division, doesn't talk to the Final Cut Pro team. There's some kind of a disconnect there because they always feature DaVinci Resolve. They've been featuring LumaFusion for a long time. You would think they would promote their own versions of the apps, of Pro apps. Instead of an app, I would love to see Apple add new features to Final Cut Pro. Absolutely. Editing on an iPad still has limit to matter what software you use. You still need your plugins, drives, etc. Exactly. That's exactly correct. Speaking of that, let's go over here. So there's DaVinci Resolve on the iPad. It's a limited version. Who knows what else is going to be there? But look at this. I put this article out before the iPad came out. Countdown to Final Cut Pro 10. I mean Final Cut Pro 10.7. Countdown to Final Cut Pro 10.7. Let's just go over there to that page. So here it is, Countdown to Final Cut Pro 10.7, and I'm saying Final Cut Pro 10.7 in October, November is what I'm going to figure. And it's been very quiet on the Final Cut Pro front. As we know, Final Cut Pro 10.5 came out November the 12th, 2020, along with the first Apple M1 Silicon Macs. 10.6 came out last year, October the 18th, 2021. Right now, today it came out, along with the M1 Pro and the M1 Max 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pro. So Final Cut Pro 10.7, if they follow the same trajectory that they have for the last several years, Final Cut Pro 10.7 should come out with when they announce the new M2 Max. Now, the M2 Max were not announced today, which means they're going to be out later in October or the beginning of November, probably. Now, I wonder if Gurman got the fact that they weren't going to do an event for the iPad. I wonder if that also applies to the Macs, M2 Macs. We don't know yet. But I'm figuring on Final Cut Pro 10.7 is going to be, it's shortly, right close to any time from here to the end of October. I think they've announced that did they announce Ventura release? But everybody's expecting it between now, at the end of November, like a week or so, along with iPad OS 16.1 and iOS 16.1 and all the other ones. Tyler says, because the Apple Pencil keyboard and mouse support, ultra-wide monitor support with large stage manager on all iPad OS 6.2, I can totally seize an iPad for everything but raw video. But do you use Mac now? The Pencil, yes. Yes, the Pencil, yes. But I like my MacBook Pro a lot, but I have lots of screen real estate. If I was on a subway, I drove into D.C. for 8.5 years when I was a post supervisor at the National Archives. And yes, I would edit on the subway sometimes if I had things to catch up on, or just, I didn't have internet on the subway, but I could do editing for sure. And the iPad would make that easier, especially with the Pencil. The Pencil is a big, big bonus point for the iPad. But there's no way Final Cut on the iPad is going to be as powerful as Final Cut on the Mac. That's impossible at this point. It's impossible. Are they going to have feature parity 100%? Well, you can't use the iPad Pen. You can't use the Apple Pencil on the Mac, so that's one thing that's going to be different. But I'm just saying, some people like their iPads, and I've had iPads almost since the beginning. And I use LumaFusion when I edit video on it. LumaFusion is years ahead of Final Cut Pro on the iPad whenever it comes out. Years ahead. So it's going to have to be catch up. But I don't think it's going to be the full version of Final Cut if it's coming out. I mean, when it's coming out. I'm pretty sure it's coming. I've heard some reports from people that said they've seen a version of it. So that doesn't mean it's coming tomorrow, but at any point, listen, now that DaVinci Resolve is over there, and Apple promoted it, at the iPad Pro event. They promoted DaVinci Resolve, which is fine. DaVinci Resolve Lite, DaVinci Resolve iPad version will sell iPads for sure. So that's good. But LumaFusion looks to be far more advanced than this version of DaVinci that's coming. Support and audio plugin support are big questions, absolutely. And as I would say, I have 1,200 plugins or more for Final Cut. I'm not going to abandon those. There's no way. I have 70 terabytes, 80 terabytes of RAID 5 connected via Thunderbolt right now. How am I going to connect that to an iPad with a single port? We'll even see RAID. I mean, one RAID needs software. I don't believe they're working on a version for the iPad. I don't know for a fact, but I don't think so. So the interesting thing is, what exactly is Apple doing over there? What exactly are they doing? Hello? Yeah, this is Richard. Yeah, we're live on the air right now. Yeah, I won't say who this is. I won't even say you're from Apple. I won't say anything. So everybody wants to know what the heck's going on with you. Well, Apple has announced this new iPad Pro, and people have kind of been expecting, a version of Final Cut Pro to run on the iPad. But instead, Apple promotes DaVinci Resolve on the iPad. A scaled down version. But so what's happening over there? You mean to tell me that though there is a version of Final Cut coming on the iPad? There is? What is it coming out this year? Huh. Okay, I won't say anything more. I'll just let people know that, well, this isn't Apple, everybody. This is not Apple on the phone, okay? This is not Apple. I just said it's not Apple. I said it's not Apple on the phone. And you're saying that there is a version of Final Cut coming to the iPad. Okay, well, that's good. I can't say when. Okay. All right. Thank you very much for calling in, and thanks for watching Final Cut TV on YouTube. Thank you very much. Talk to you again. Here's what I think's happening. I think that we haven't seen any Final Cut Pro news this month. So I'm saying Final Cut Pro 10.7 is coming out. In the proximity, I don't think the proximity of Ventura is enough. I think they're going to wait for the version of Final Cut 10.7 to come out with the M2 Max. Now, the M2 Max, they could come out with Ventura. We don't know. Mark Gurman was absolutely correct in saying there's going to be no Apple event this year, at least for the iPad. And since there's no event for the iPad, I doubt there would be an event just for the Max, the M2 Max. So, what is today? Tuesday, October the 18th. 1 year ago today, Apple had Final Cut Pro 10.6. I don't know if it was released. I think it was released on the 18th, October the 18th, 2021. So any point from here in the next 2 weeks, Final Cut Pro 10.7. That's what I'm saying. Alongside the M2 Max. Now, are we going to see the M2 Mac Pro? Or is that coming out in 2023? Final Cut Pro on iPad S could be full feature. Maybe that's why they've been rewriting Final Cut Pro in Swift. No, it can't be full feature. I doubt that. It's going to be, I don't even think they're going to call it Final Cut Pro. I think they're going to call it Final Cut for iPad or something like that. It's not going to be full features. There's no way it's going to have the power that the Final Cut Pro does on the Mac. It's no way. You mean to tell me that an iPad can be as powerful as a Mac Studio? No, I don't see it. It's going to be a light version, just like DaVinci Resolve is. Yes, it's there, but it's only got 2 pages. It's not the full version. The iPad, the M2 is fine, but it's still running on iPad OS, not Mac OS. You still can't use plugins. You can't use audio units. I don't know if audio units were in and then they're out, then they're in, they're out. You can't use, how do I connect the RAID and storage to an iPad? It's not going to be, I doubt, no, I could be wrong, but I doubt it's going to be the full version. I don't think they're even going to call it Final Cut Pro. They're going to call it Final Cut for the iPad. That's what I think. I am surprised at Resolve for iPad, happily so. Right, but it's only the cut page. It's only the cut page and the color correction page at this point. And I doubt that both of those are going to be as full-featured as the version on the Mac. Final Cut runs on a MacBook Air with the M1 chip. There is an M1 in an iPad. Why not? Because it's iPad OS, not Mac OS. You don't have the memory on an iPad that you have in a Mac. You don't have the horsepower. It's more than just the M1 chip. Just because they stick an M1 chip in there, it doesn't have all the other support that like the Mac Studio has. I'm not saying it won't run. I'm saying it's not going to be the full featured version. I doubt that. I doubt it very much. Just like Resolve, look at Resolve on the Mac, look at Resolve on the iPad from what we know so far. There's no parity between those two. One is very scaled down and one is very full featured. It's not the same. They're not the same. I don't think so. Maybe Final Cut Express name could be. I don't think they're going to call it Final Cut Pro on the iPad. I think they're going to call it Final Cut Express, something. But then what are they going to do? They're going to have iMovie, you're going to have LumaFusion, you're going to have DaVinci Resolve, you're going to have Final Cut Lite, Final Cut Express. They won't call it Lite. I know that, but I'm just saying, to me, it's going to be a light version of Final Cut. But the point is this. It would not, at this point, since DaVinci's come out, well, once again, Apple on their event page promoted LumaFusion, and they promoted DaVinci Resolve for their iPad. Once again, here's DaVinci Resolve in their newsroom. They're promoting a competitor. And let me see what else. And here is the actual iPad, the iPad page itself. And what do they promote there? LumaFusion. So on the iPad Pro launch, they're promoting 2 other NLEs on the iPad. 2 other NLEs. Now, they're big favorites of LumaFusion. We've seen them promote LumaFusion for years. LumaFusion is by far the most advanced NLE on the iPad at this point. Final Cut versus Resolve is a poor comparison. Resolve is a suite of apps, really. It's still not even the edit page of Resolve. It's the cut page. It's the light version of Resolve, not even the edit page. At least by the graphic. Now, we don't know for a fact because there's no details as typically as Apple does, or not Apple, but Resolve. They haven't released any details yet. They're forthcoming. They did say it's coming out in 2022, but it's not even the edit page of Resolve. It's just cut page, which is like a scaled down version of the edit page. So that tells you right there. I just don't listen. It's not going to be the full version. I'm pretty confident of that. There's going to be a scaled down version, whatever compromises they have to make to get Final Cut, to cram it onto the iPad, to get it to work in iPad OS. And then if it's on iPad OS, is it going to work on the iPhone like LumaFusion does? Would you want to use Final Cut Pro on something this size? No, I don't. LumaFusion works very well, but they've been developing it for years. Plenty of experience. Would I get Final Cut for the iPad? Of course I would get it. I get all the versions of Final Cut. Will they include it with the version? It'll probably be on the App Store. It'd probably be $10, $20, I would imagine. But Final Cut Pro 10.7, I'm much more excited about Final Cut Pro 10.7 than I am on Final Cut for the iPad. Final Cut for the iPad seems like it's a neat little product, but it's not what I use Final Cut for. If I'm going to edit on the iPad, I'm going to edit with LumaFusion. We'll have to see, of course, what they develop. But listen, I do like the pencil. That's one thing I absolutely like. I wish that I could use that on a trackpad or on a touchscreen MacBook Pro that's coming out that they're working on. Hey, look at this. This is my backyard. This is my backyard from the other day. Sunday morning, I think it was. I looked outside, the sun was setting. The sun was coming up, and it's beautiful, beautiful. Fine, beautiful. I took my iPhone 14 Pro Max out there, handheld, and just did a pan up. David says he's starting to like Resolve. I like Resolve. I absolutely like Resolve. If Final Cut blew up and they fired the entire team, I would go to Resolve in a heartbeat for my Mac NLE. Apple Pencil has a new hover mode. No idea what that is. I think you don't have to touch the screens. You just hover over top somewhere close. Let me see what this is. Real quick. Yeah. Let me just copy and paste this real quick for my friend Brad. Copy. There we go. Brad also just sent me a message. When will we see the new Final Cut Pro? I think we're going to see it October or early November. Final Cut Pro 10.7. Alongside the new M2 Max, whatever they are. 14 and 16 inch. It's hard for me not to get the best and fastest Mac. Since I'm using my MacBook Pro, it's going to be hard to resist getting the M2 MacBook Pro, just like the iPhone. I had the iPhone 13 Pro Max, the iPhone 14 comes out, traded it in, bought it. Probably the same for the M2 MacBook Pro, the 16 inch. If they have more, I'm presuming I'm going to get one. I don't really need, hopefully they do the new MacBooks at the same time they do the Mac Pro so I can compare which one. Because if I like the Mac Pro enough, I would get the Mac Pro and I would keep my M1 Max 16 inch for when I travel. I'm not doing that much traveling right now, so let me just check one. You know what's interesting? I'm not sure what happened, but I had to change my AV sync with this live streaming. Max, so is Resolve coming to the iPad Pros? Yes, it's coming to the iPad Pros. From what we've seen, it's a limited version of Resolve. It's not the whole suite. It's the cut page and the color page. But I really doubt it's going to be the same version that's on the desktop version. I think there's going to be things that are missing for the iPad version. We'll have to see. Obviously, I don't know for. It isn't like I am friends with people in Blackmagic. I do have some friends in the Final Cut Pro ecosystem. So, what else is happening? That's really, it was a surprise to see DaVinci Resolve on the iPad. Even though it's a scaled down version. Let me see. Apple only offering $500 for perfect condition loaded previous iPad Pro in trade. Yeah, I get half price on my phone. I get half price. So the iPhone 13 Pro Max, I got $700 and some dollars. The new one costs $1,500, so half price, 1 year. But I expect the same on the MacBook. I would not accept less than half price because I could sell it easily. A 1-year-old MacBook Pro in perfect condition with Apple Care, I could sell it easily for over half price. But I like the ability I can just do it when I trade in. We'll have to see. Have to see if I'll trade in. Do I need a new Mac? No, but I want one, so I'll get it. Kind of fascinating that if in Final Cut Pro, if I stack multiple color wheels, it just crushes my system. And with Resolve, it runs fine. And now that's on the iPad. Well, if the Resolve is isn't a Resolve like the most advanced color correction, one of the most advanced color correction systems out there. They've been around for a long time. So I guess they've optimized better. I don't know how Final Cut does that, but we'll have to see. So anyway, Final Cut 7, 10.7, I think is coming out later this month in October or early November. It's going to come out, Ventura's got to come out first or at the same time because there's features that Ventura unlocks in Final Cut that's not available with the current version of Mac OS. And it makes sense, once again, it makes sense to release it alongside of the new M2 Max. So this is what I'm saying. Countdown to Final Cut Pro 10.7, Final Cut Pro 10.7 in October, November. It's been very quiet. So November, Final Cut Pro 10.5, November the 12th, 2020, alongside Apple Silicon M1 Max. Final Cut Pro 10.6, 1 year ago today, along with the M1 Pro and M1 Max 14 and 16-inch MacBook Pros. 1 year ago today, 10.6 came out. So both of those releases of a major full number version of Final Cut were alongside Mac, desktop Mac, and MacBook Pro releases, right? So I'm saying 10.7, October, November 2022, along with the M2 Max. That's where I'm getting that information. Now, of course, Apple likes to do things on their own schedule. So, but I think that's pretty reliable. I think we can figure that out. So if you haven't seen it, let's put this back up here. There is DaVinci Resolve on an iPad. Once again, this is the cut page. This is the cut page. If you see those icons at the bottom, there's 2 pages. Normally, there's 4 or 5 pages on the full version. So this is definitely a scaled down version. It's not the whole suite of applications. It does have the color wheel, and it has the cut page. It doesn't. Now, this is based on this graphic. Okay, this is based on this graphic. That's the only information we have so far. It doesn't even have the full edit page there. It has the cut page, which is like a light version of the edit page. Like a light version. So, do we know what that means? No, we just have the graphic. That's all we have is the graphic. Do you think Resolve will be available for the M1 iPad Pros? And when do you think Resolve will be coming out? They said Resolve is coming out in 2022. That's what Apple said. I don't know if it's going to be on the M1. I think it might need the M2s. I don't know for a fact, but that's what I think. Apple got consumer products to focus on. It's been years like this. Final Cut Pro is the least they care of. Well, Apple corporate, yes. Apple corporate, of course. I mean, this is why they're a giant company right here, is the iPhone. Why wouldn't you give most of your attention to this device? Common sense. Apple's shareholders who have Apple stock, of course they want to focus on the products that make them the most money, and that's the product that makes them the most money, the iPhone. So Apple general, it's not that they don't care, it's not in their radar. But the Final Cut Pro team is very passionate, and I'm sure they fight for us. So, unlike DaVinci, it's not just software, it's a revolution from conforming editing, color, sound effects. It's worth the update and time they spend on it. Possible new larger iPad with multiple ports for better I/O in the near future. Near future, they just released the iPad Pro. I don't think the near future, maybe next year. And I'd like to see multiple ports. I'd like to see Thunderbolt connectivity to the iPad. Then you'd be talking. I think the Resolve app will only be, iPad app will be successful with cloud capabilities on the Mac version. Yeah, that makes sense. That you know, that's a very good point, Tyler. Since DaVinci Resolve came out with this iCloud integration and stuff, it makes more sense that that came to the iPad first. Like I said, Apple has an iPad Pro event. What do they feature? They feature LumaFusion and DaVinci Resolve. LumaFusion and DaVinci Resolve. On the day of launch of the iPad Pro, the brand new iPad Pro, the M2 iPad Pro, they have DaVinci Resolve and LumaFusion on the iPad for video editors. Final Cut Pro is not anywhere in sight on the iPad. Not yet. Not yet. Yeah, I think I talked to LumaFusion multiple, 6 times, 7 times on the show. And we always ask them about Final Cut Pro. And they said that wouldn't surprise them to see a version of Final Cut Pro on the iPad. It's not really going to affect what they're doing because they're different than Final Cut Pro. In a lot of ways, they're better. So I think that if and when, I don't think it's if at this point. I think when we see a version of Final Cut on the iPad, it'll be interesting. Then you'll have 3 major NLEs on the iPad. I don't think anybody else is a major player. Maybe there's another major version of a NLE on the iPad that I don't know about, but those are the 3. Those are the 3. But you know what? Let's see what Final Cut Pro 10.7 brings to the table. I am the eternal Final Cut Pro optimist. I'm always waiting for the next version to come out. I'm always saying, just wait for this next version. It'll be better. It'll be bigger, better, brighter. I think that that's very possible with Final Cut Pro 10.7. I think, 10.5 wasn't much. As far as a full feature, a full number update from 10.4 to 10.5, there's no comparison that 10.4 was leaps and bounds, had more features than 10.5. 10.5 was a small update. 10.6 was a little bit different, but still nothing compared to 10.1 to 10.4. No comparison. No comparison. Now, 10.6.2 is very cool. It added dupe detection and audio isolation. Those are very cool updates. That was a point-to-point update. I'm talking about full number updates. So we haven't had any activity in Final Cut Pro since the beginning of August. I think they put out 10.6.4. 10.6.3 and 10.6.4 were both small bug fixes. One came out in May. One came out at the beginning of August. 10.6.2 came out in March or the beginning of April, right before NAB, which is when I expected it to come out. I expected an update to Final Cut Pro for NAB, and they delivered. So who would use Final Cut Pro on the iPad and throw away their Mac? Or would you just use it as a supplement to your Mac? How would you use it? Of course, I would get it and try it out just to be familiar with it, but it's not going to replace my Mac. It's not going to replace my 16-inch MacBook Pro. That's not going to happen. But to me, it would be a novelty. Other people are more serious. However, that pencil is very, very cool. I love the pencil on the iPad. I really, really do. But if you're excited about the iPad version of Final Cut, you certainly wouldn't throw your Mac away, right? You wouldn't sell your Mac and only edit on the iPad? Would any of you do that? We'll have to wait and see. I We'll have to see what Apple's doing with Final Cut. I think 10.7 is coming out. That's the Mac version. The iPad version, we'll have to see how that works. We will have to see how that works. Who's excited about Resolve coming to the iPad, even though it's only the cut page and the color page? Anybody excited? I'll get it. I'll get it. I have the studio version of Resolve, and I like it. I like it a lot. It's a very, very cool Resolve 18. It's a very cool NLE. What do you think? What do you think? So it would not surprise me to see maybe with 10.7, Final Cut Pro 10.7, they also will release an iPad version of Final Cut at the same time. How that's going to work with licensing, I don't know. You get a free version if you have the full version. Probably, I would probably suspect that they would have a fee in the iPad, the iOS store for Final Cut. I would presume that. They already have the free version, which is iMovie. Final Cut on iPad would be useful if it acts like Pages app, where I can continue project on my iPad from your Mac. If it's a standalone app, that would be pretty clunky workflow. No, I'm sure it's going to be. No, I agree. No, of course it would be you transfer from the iPad to your Mac, but LumaFusion does that now. You can buy an add-on Final Cut Pro XML export from LumaFusion and continue on in Final Cut Pro from LumaFusion. But also, LumaFusion also runs on M1 Macs. It runs on M1 Macs. Now, it's not, they're developing it for the iPad, so the M1 version, the Mac version, is not the same experience as the iPad version or even the iPhone version, but it does work on M1 Macs. They did not restrict that. At some point, maybe they'll make the jump completely over and do a Mac version. The iPad screen is with HD and advanced color spaces, makes sense for Resolve color work. Yeah, the screen does. I'm just worried about the horsepower behind the iPad. I know it has the M2 chip, but there's more to the M2 chip than just the single chip itself. Eric says HD. He meant HDR. Yep. Are you anybody excited about, this iPad is a big deal, iPad Pro. I'm not going to get one. I don't see me getting one. I don't use it enough. I use it to read books at night, and when I go in the bedroom, before I go to sleep, I'll read a book or listen to a couple of videos. I do like the pencil a lot, though, for handwriting and stuff. But I'm not going to get one. I'm going to wait, save up for my Mac coming out. Who's excited about the Mac, about new Macs? Now, since they've done this on a Tuesday, is next Tuesday going to be the Mac Day, the Mac Day? Maybe Final Cut Pro 10.7? They could introduce Final Cut Pro 10.7. They've done this in the past. In small print at the bottom specs for the M2 Max. Tested on Final Cut Pro 10.7 to be released later in 2022. Or a future version of Final Cut Pro 10.7. They've done that in the past where they have announced it in a little small print before. I will get new iPad Pro. There you go. Oh, I'm sure it's going to sell. A lot of people are excited about it. But I'm not going to get one. I'm not going to get one. I don't use it enough. I have an iPad something, I forget what I have. It works fine for me. But I'm excited for you. I'm excited for people that want the iPad Pro. Some people are very stingy with Final Cut Pro stuff. Oh, I don't want that feature. I don't want that feature. No. I want just my features. BS. That's a bunch of BS. That's just being selfish. I want all the features. I want the features you want. I want features that I want. I want Final Cut Pro on the iPad for the people that want it on the iPad. I want Blackmagic Raw in Final Cut Pro for people that use that. I want everybody to get all their features that they possibly can get. But so Final Cut Pro on the iPad, that's cool for people who want it. I'm not going to be getting an iPad Pro, so I'll hopefully it'll run on an older version. Editing on iPad will interest more the general consumers. Editing for social media, yes. Short videos, I wouldn't replace my editing solution, but still cool to have and try. That's exactly correct. Still cool to have and to try. I agree with that. The larger storage you buy, the faster the iPad is due to a unified system memory. That's a good point. The CPU, GPU, RAM all live on that chip, making the M2 pretty much the only important SoC. Yes, but what about the Mac, the M2 Mac Pro? It's going to be more than just a single chip. It's going to have PCIe slots. It's going to have expandable graphics, blah, blah, blah. Otherwise, why call it the iPad? Why call it the Mac Pro? It's not going to be a Pro machine with expansion, replaceable parts. Why call it the Pro? Why not just the Studio is good enough? That's what the Studio is, right? Yes. That's exactly right. So, don't forget, there it is. Subscribe over there at YouTube. Be notified, ring the bell, whatever the heck that is. I don't even pay that much attention to it. I just do what everybody else does. They point to subscribe over there at YouTube. Subscribe over there at YouTube, yes. But anyway, so I didn't go to NAB New York. I think it starts this week. I didn't go to that. It wasn't really that interesting to me. I am planning on going to NAB in Las Vegas next year like I did this year. Absolutely, that does interest me, especially since there's not a Final Cut Pro Summit like there has been in the past, where everybody gets together at one location for 4 days in the same hotel. I get to see all my friends. They are having a worldwide Final Cut Pro Summit tour for 1 day of training. I think New York is coming up beginning of November, then Austin, Texas is the second one coming up for the middle of November. Then they have a couple more, Chicago, Florida, Austin, Texas, New York, and California, LA. I think LA is the last one. So I'm not planning on going to any of those. I don't need training, but if you want the 1 day of training, it's a great deal. I think it's $125. That includes the Final Cut Pro certification exam, which by itself is $149. So this is cheaper than getting the Final Cut Pro certification exam. They have 3 different exams. This is cheaper if you want to do that. All righty. I think if you have anything else to shout out there before I get out of here. I wasn't planning on coming on today. Then I saw this DaVinci thing and on the iPad. I said, that's kind of at least interesting. They promoted 2 different NLEs in the iPad Pro announcement, LumaFusion and DaVinci. Now, DaVinci is a scaled down version. Absolutely. At least what we've seen for the graphics. We'll have to see. I mean, how long they've been working on an iPad version? Maybe I guess they can share some of the same code as the Mac version if they develop it for the M1 silicons. I guess that's true. But I'm looking for the Mac Pro, personally. I'm waiting for the Mac Pro announcement, the M2 Mac Pro, and the M2 16-inch MacBook Pro. Those are the 2 Macs that I will be interested in. When the Studio came out last spring, I didn't need that. I didn't get that. That wasn't for me. I got my MacBook Pro. I'm doing fine with that. But I want the iPad, Final Cut Pro on the iPad for all of you that want it. I'm excited for you. Okay? I'm excited that you're excited. Of course, I'll get a version of Final Cut for the iPad if it comes out, if it can run on my older iPad. If it can't, then I won't. I'm not going to buy an iPad just to run Final Cut Pro on. That's not what I'm going to do. But anyway, one more time, I say the countdown to Final Cut Pro 10.7 is on. I'm saying it's going to be out last week of October, first week of November, sometime around that point. What features it has? No idea. No idea. Other than the fact that you'll have to get, well, Ventura is required to work with cinematic mode. If you shot cinematic mode on iOS 16, Ventura, you need to have Ventura in order for Final Cut to be able to edit that. The current version of Final Cut edits cinematic video shot on iOS 16 in the Ventura beta, because I tested it. As a matter of fact, I think it's here. Yeah, there it is right there. So that's right there. Right here, I tested this. Here's a cinematic mode. This is Final Cut Pro in the cinematic mode, iOS 16 with Ventura Beta 7. I think Beta 8 or Beta 9 is out right now. The full version, public release version, should be out shortly. All right, everyone. Thanks for stopping by. It is certainly appreciated. And you can check me out all social media, Richard Taylor TV, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I think we're even on Twitch TV today. I think I even plugged that. And on Twitter, of course. All the social media, I don't have a different name for each one. They're all Richard Taylor TV. Richard Taylor TV. All of them. I'm barely on Instagram. I never post to Twitch TV except for some of these live streams. And I post mostly to Twitter and Facebook. But my Facebook, if you go to Facebook, just look for Final Cut Pro, Final Cut Radio TV, Final Cut Radio TV on Facebook. That's the most active Facebook group I have for doing Final Cut Pro stuff. My personal page is not, I don't do that. Thank you, Richard. Can't wait to see the upcoming version of Final Cut. We are optimistic. I am the eternal Final Cut Pro optimist. I'm always saying, it's just around the corner. It's just around the corner. New version of Final Cut. But I'm expecting Final Cut 10.7. It's going to be here, I'd say within a couple of weeks, anytime now, maybe next Tuesday. Next Tuesday sounds good. All right, everyone. What do you think? Any other comments before we sign off for the day? I like coming on here so everybody can see, can have a chance to talk. The community, the Final Cut Pro community, all of you, get a chance to make comments live. Apple does watch these videos. When I say Apple, I mean the Final Cut Pro team. They do watch these videos. They do watch them. So if you make a comment, they very well could see it. I am going to miss my Final Cut Pro family, not seeing them this year. All my friends, we've seen each other 2019. When did we start? 2016, 2017, 2018, and 2019. We all got together in Cupertino. We all stayed at the Juniper Hotel. We had dinner together, lunch together, chatted, nothing but Final Cut Pro for 4 days. I'm really going to miss that this year. It's not happening this year, not like that. Brandon says, first-time watcher, long-time follower. Thank you, Brandon, for tuning in. Thank you very much. I'm just curious, are you more excited about the Final Cut on the iPad if it comes Resolve on the iPad, or you're more excited about Final Cut Pro 10.7 and the new M2 Max. Now, I'm more excited about the M2 Max for sure and Final Cut 10.7. The iPad version, I'm excited for you that want it, but I'm not going to be using that for Final Cut. Not me personally, but I'm excited. If you're excited, I'm glad for you. Not much of an iPad user. Yeah, I'm not much of an iPad user. Not for video editing, except for LumaFusion. LumaFusion is fantastic. I can't say enough good things about LumaFusion. Resolve, we'll have to see. I use Resolve on my Mac. I got the full suite. I got the Studio. On the iPad, I don't know. Always excited for an update to Final Cut Pro. You know, they could drop that at any time, but I'm going to presume they're going to coincide it with the M2 Max, which are coming out, let's just say next Tuesday. We'll decide. The M2 Max are coming out next Tuesday. That's a good time for Final Cut Pro 10.7 to be released, or at least to be demoed, or whatever the heck they're going to do. Who the heck knows? Apple. Yeah. They called a little earlier. If you missed it, you rewind and you can see my phone call. But I was very, very surprised to see DaVinci on the iPad. And Apple promoting it. New iPad Pro product, big announcement. Apple promotes LumaFusion, and they promote DaVinci Resolve for video editors on the iPad. It's just astounding to me that they do that. Maybe because there's no Final Cut Pro version for the iPad coming out in the next year. That would make more sense. You would think if Final Cut Pro on the iPad was happening next week, it could. They would either hold off or they would mention it, since the DaVinci Resolve version is not coming out till later in 2022. I'm assuming Final Cut Pro will be coming at some point for the iPad. I presume at some point, but I don't think it'll be Final Cut Pro. I think it'll be Final Cut for the iPad. They'll call it Final Cut for the iPad. And it'll probably require an M2 or better iPad Pro. Can you imagine running Final Cut on this? I can't. LumaFusion does a great job, but I just can't see Final Cut running on a phone, for example. Only the iPad? Final Cut Pad. There you go. Final Cut Pad. I think it'll just be called Final Cut for the iPad. That's my guess at this point. All right, any other comments before I get out of here? I'm going to get ready for dinner today. It's fall today. Very, very fall. This is my backyard for those that missed it the first time. Look at these beautiful fall colors. This is my backyard. Beautiful fall colors here. Editing on a phone is silly from any editor's perspective. Not for professional editors who edit in big studios, I understand. But for mobile filmmaking and stuff, it's not. That people do that all the time. The attraction of editing a short clip on this with LumaFusion, filming it on the phone, editing it on the phone, and uploading to YouTube. I'm not talking about 30 minutes. I'm talking about, some people do, but short clips like for Instagram or other social media, Twitter, whatever. Doing it on one device is pretty attractive. I've done it myself. So yeah, editing on the phone is fine for people who want to do it. I'm not going to do that, but I'll let you go to dinner now. Thank you, Brandon. Thank you for tuning in. I am going to go to dinner now, and everybody have a great fall. We're going to call it now. The new M2s are coming out next Tuesday, and Final Cut Pro 10.7 will be announced next Tuesday. Let's just say it. If it doesn't come out, it'll be out shortly thereafter. All right. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in. My name is Richard Taylor. Don't forget to subscribe over there at YouTube. Richard Taylor TV. Go over there and subscribe and be notified and all that good stuff. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in.